Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn.
All right, this pattern is easily my most effective midge pattern. And we have another version of this up on the YouTube channel, but so this is kind of a version 2 that seems to do well as the first one, but of course you got to change up your flies and make them prettier eventually. The first one's pretty plain Jane, but this one still fishes just as well. It's got a couple of other pieces to make it a little bit more imitative of the pupa. So this is a midge pupa or emerger, and it's meant to hang vertically or mostly vertically in the water, just off the surface. So a lot of times when the fish are eating midges, they'll focus on those bugs that are just getting out of the surface film. Okay, so the hook I use for this here is a new one that I've been using recently. It's a Partridge fine check nymph or emerger hook. So it's got a finer wire, it's barbless, and it works great as opposed to probably some of the original ones I used, which were more of a lighter scud hook. But anyway, so we're just going to start off with our thread. This is some Danville 70 denier, and I'm going to work our way back just to about the hook point. Let that hang down there. And again, it's very simple. So I'm going to grab some of my Easy Magic Dub, and what I like to do is singe the very end of that with a lighter. And then you can kind of roll that. And then if you need to, like on this one, has a little clump there, I'll just snip that off. But the rest of it has a nice taper to it. So the way I gauge this is I'm going to take about roughly the body length and then tie it in at that point. And you got to hold that right on top, like I didn't. And then as you move forward, you can give it a little bit more pressure. You want that to stay right on top, and then I'm going to come back and bind it down a little bit more before I end up here. Okay, so now I can snip off the excess here. And the original fly, I literally would just put my foam on and be done. And this will still work, but I like to throw a little bit of extra razzle dazzle. So what I'm going to do is grab some black UV ice dub, and you don't need much. And one of the reasons I like the black UV ice dub is it's got these long flashy fibers, and that's going to brush out kind of nicely. So we're just going to lightly dub this onto our thorax here, and you don't need a whole lot because this is a pretty small pattern. Just right there. We want to leave ourselves about that much for the foam. So about half the shank length, maybe a little less. And I'm actually going to add just a little bit more because we're going to brush this out, so some of that bulk will go away. Okay, and again, like I said, we want some of these fibers to be brushed out, so we'll just grab our brush or Velcro or whatever you want to use and just start to lightly brush out these fibers. And they'll come out pretty nicely because it's some synthetics there, and they'll want to do that. And you'll see we've got a few stragglers out there, and you can come in here and clip them off, but again, it's not going to matter that much because as these bugs emerge, they've got legs and they've got all sorts of goodies coming out. So if we've left ourselves some room, we can now grab some red hollow tinsel. This is the medium size holographic tinsel. And on each side, we're going to create a little wing pad. So what I'll do is I want to take the curvature of this hollow tinsel and tie it so it's going against the fly. I want it to curl around, And so we don't want that poking out is the idea here. So we're going to tie that in right in front of that bunch of dubbing. And I don't want that rotating up and around, so you want to make sure that that's nice and flush against the body there. And then I'm just going to trim that. We'll come back and hit it later, so just trim it kind of roughly at this point. Then flip your tinsel over and do the same thing on the other side. Tie that in towards the top, and then the torque of the thread will spin it around to where it needs to be. Like that. And again, just a rough cut here. We'll come in here and fine tune these in a sec. Okay, so that's go. We're gonna tie back over these guys. Oops. Want to make sure those guys stay put. Okay, now we grab our Evisote, and this is just some 1/8 inch, and I usually like to cut it in square amounts and just enough to kind of fill that hook gap a little. And you can kind of get a feel for that to, you know, the idea is you want to float this fly. So what I'll do is I kind of gauge, I want about the same amount as the thorax there. And so I'm going to lay that down, and it's going to cover up the eye of the hook, so don't worry. But you want to do a pretty tight wrap so it cinches it down there. And you want that foam, at least this is the piece we're concerned with, to be flush this way with that fly, because that's what will float on the surface. And now I'm going to whip finish. And don't worry about whip finishing around the eye. This is the most important little piece. And as long as you get that in there tight, this foam's not going to go anywhere. Okay, now we're going to grab our foam here that we don't want, and you're going to pull that up and get your scissors down in there. And then just cut that relatively close. Just like that. Now, when we're going to fish this, of course, your eye of your hook's a little buried, but don't worry, you just flip that over and you can expose that eye and you're fine. The most important thing is that this will float the rest of the fly there. And now we're going to clean up our wing buds, and I just like to come in here at an angle. And there we go. That's our new and improved Foamerger. You fish that, you're not going to be able to see it usually because it's going to be pretty small. I fish these down to a size 24, 28. But this one here, this is an 18. But probably average size that I use is a 20 or 22. But what I'll do is I'll fish them behind some other midge that I can see, or at least a little bit of like Loon Biostrike, a tiny bit on the tippet up a little further so I can see where things are. And then you want to apply some Loxa floatant or whatever floatant you like, but Loxa works the best for this very tip. You don't want to put floatant anywhere down here. The very tip you put floatant, the fly will float vertically or near vertically, and guarantee this fly will outfish any other midge pattern that I've ever thrown, at least. And give it a try. It's pretty easy. For these materials, go to our store, store.flyfishfood.com, and you can get them there.